now time for sewing, and what we're through is how to do a single thread technique. What that means is you have the ability to control the slack, the amount of thread that you're working with. How you're going to do this is grab your thread and you're going to take 1.5 arms length, 2 if you need. I'm going to teach you how to control that slack. So it's better to have more than enough thread than too little. And simply cut that. You're going to create a small loop in your thread, which allows you to easily push that through the eyelet of the needle. And then you can grab that loop that you created and pull that through until one end falls through. Once you've pushed that loop through, you're going to pull that until the shorter end of your thread falls down. What you're going to see are 2 ends of your thread going through the eyelet of the needle. There's a shorter end and a longer end. What you call this shorter end is the feeder thread. This allows you to feed that through the eyelet of your needle, choking up or removing that slack, or you can pull on the longer side, giving yourself more room, more thread to work with in your sewing. So this is a really great technique because it allows you to really control that slack during your sewing. It's important that you understand you want to start on your dominant side. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start on the right-hand side of the head. If you are left-handed, you're going to start on the left side of the head. Now, what we're going to be doing is going through those 3 unique types of stitches: a double anchor stitch, a single anchor stitch, and a top stitch. Everywhere we see a marking clip, you're going to be doing a single anchor stitch. Where we begin our sewing and where we end our sewing, you're going to be doing a double anchor. That's to really lock it in, hold everything in place. And if you're ever concerned about instability or slipping, you can always do a double anchor. You can always do single anchors. Where you want to be careful is where you apply those top stitches. A top stitch is simply just gathering the wefts together, but it's not locking anything in place. So we're going to go through exactly what type of stitch to do and where to make sure that everything stays in place on the head where it belongs, preventing any slipping or falling or sagging of the wefts. What you want to do as you get into sewing is make sure that you have total control of this thread. You don't want the feeder thread to slide through the eyelet of the needle. So you're going to palm that. I'm right-handed. I'm holding the needle with my pointer and my thumb, and I'm going to hold that slack in my hand so it doesn't slip or slide through the eyelet of the needle. What we're going to be doing now is starting behind that second bead or where you have that first fold. So you want to go behind that first fold, and you know that's on the interior because it's signified by that second marking clip from the front. So we're going to create just a knot. It's like tying our shoes just to get started. So let's check out exactly how we get started in our sewing. Where we're going to begin our sewing is right in front of this marking clip because I know the fold is right here. I want to make sure that I can really grab that fold. So what I want to do just to start my sewing is stabilize my weft, go in behind. Now, as I'm going behind, I'm making sure that I'm scooping up all of the hair behind that anchor row. If you run into the clip, you can make those minor adjustments. Scooping up all of the hair in the anchor row. You can stabilize that needle as you push it through. You're going to glide that through all the way. You're going to see the shorter end of the thread fall through. And you're going to work all the way towards the end. Notice how I'm not overextending my arm. I'm just keeping everything nice and close to the head. Now we're going to tie a knot. If you can control the needle in this hand, great. If you need to put this needle down, you can put this into the top of her hair here so that you can have this hand free. Now what you're going to do is just simply tie a knot. If you need a lot of excess threads, you can get a grip of the thread and be able to create that double knot. By all means do, because you can cut this thread later. So I'm just going to go in, create one knot. And create another knot. Really locking that in place. And you can hold this or clip this up out of your way. You can tuck it behind the marking clip here. Now, the reason we're starting here at that first fold is because we're going to be working towards the face. We call this back stitching. We're working towards the face and then stitching back across the entire head and then duplicating the same thing on the opposite side. This gives a lot of stability around the hair, especially around the face where there's vellus, baby hairs, because this is where the most damage can happen if you don't have a beautiful, nice low tension anchor row, or if you don't have enough support in your sewing. Once we have that, I'm removing my needle. So I'm going to over direct the thread in the direction that I'm sewing, going behind, picking up all of the hair in the anchor row, making sure I get that weft. And as you go through with your needle, you want to make sure that it's going through nice and vertically. Now, in order to create this knot, you want to make sure that you crisscross the thread that's still in the eyelet of the needle and cross that over. So the needle is going through the center. Essentially, there's a circle of thread that's happening. I push this needle through. I control that slack. Now, notice where my hands are. They're up, they're nice and high. I have control over my thread. I'm not pulling my hands downward. If I bring my hands downward, I'm going to drag all of those wefts down and my sewing won't stay on top of my row. So you maintain maximum control, cleaner wefts by holding this up. Now what you want to do in order to create a double anchor is you're simply going to turn twice. So here's once, twice. Notice my fingers are away from me like a peace sign. I bring that through. I go through the thread. Notice how I'm holding my thumb away. And what this does is allows me to place my thumb here, remove my finger, and apply pressure as I pull up to close this stitch. To really lock it in place, I lift up, I rock it to the left and to the right. That is creating a double anchor stitch. Now, same thing, we're going to create another anchor stitch, but I'm checking to see where my bead is. I have room to get in one more stitch. Actually, I don't. I'm going to jump to the opposite side of this bead. So I'm going to over direct, go behind, picking up enough hair behind in that anchor row. Remember, the goal is to actually sew the wefts to the anchor row, so you have to scoop up the hair in that anchor row between the beads. Stabilizing my needle, I'm going to crisscross my thread, pick up my needle. That needle is going through the circle or through the loop of thread. I bring this up. And to create a single anchor, I simply rotate one time, stabilizing with my thumb, going through, removing all of that slack. I remove my fingers and pull up, still stabilizing. If you don't stabilize and apply pressure, when you close this, you could pull up and it could cause her discomfort. I rock it to the left and to the right, and I continue. Over directing the thread, going behind, picking up enough hair to really support and get attached to that anchor row behind, crisscross that thread, grab my needle that's between in that loop, pulling that through. Notice how I'm always controlling and palming that feeder thread as I'm pulling that slack, keeping my hands nice and close to the head. Lifting up, I'm going to rotate one time, stabilizing, going through the thread, removing my fingers, and pulling up to lock it in place to the left and to the right. Notice how all the stitches are staying nice and clean on top of that row. If you see your stitching start to drag down, That's really telling you that you're pulling your hands down or you're coming out towards you versus staying nice and high above your row as you're closing or as you're picking up that slack and closing your loops. I'm going to just peek through here and see where that bead is. I want to make sure that I don't stitch behind this bead directly. I always want to stitch on either side of that bead. So I'm going to clip this back in place. I've moved that clip so I can see where I'm going and what I'm doing. I've moved that down here to prevent any of those wefts from slipping or sliding down. Over directing again, I'm going on the opposite side of the bead, so in front of the bead here. Now this is where we're going to do another single anchor. Lifting up and rotate once, stabilizing with my thumb, going through, and applying pressure particularly right here around the face, rocking to the left and to the right. Now what we want to do here in front of the first bead is we want to get as many back to back to back single anchor stitches as we possibly can. Most of the time it's 4, and a great way to remember how many to do is knuckles. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes maybe it's 5, but it's those back to back anchor stitches we can refer to as knuckles. So over directing again, going behind. Crisscrossing, keeping that needle in the center of the loop. Picking up that slack, lifting up, rotating once, stabilizing with your thumb, going up. If you see any hair that's dragging up, make sure you just gently remove that before you close your stitch. Pulling up, I'm stabilizing with my thumb, rocking to the left and to the right. So there's 2. I'm going to do another. Over direct, crisscross, grab that needle, pull it through, lift up, rotate once, bring your needle through, removing that slack. Notice I'm still palming this here. Applying pressure, rocking to the left and to the right. Now I can get 1, maybe 2 more in. Stabilizing my needle, crisscrossing with my thumb, bringing this through. Notice how my hand is going away from the head to prevent that drag from happening. Rotating once, stabilizing with my thumb, going up through my fingers, applying pressure, lifting up and rocking back. You don't want to rock towards the face in order to lock this in place, because what can happen is you can pop the stitch over the front of that edge. The goal is to keep it very secure on the top edge. So when you lock this one, lift up, apply pressure, rock back, up and back. So we have room to get 1 more stitch in. And you can always feel, if you have it and there's no free edge to pick at and everything's nice and secure in place, that's okay. If you have room to get 1 more in, or if there's something to pick at, you want to go and apply 1 more stitch or as many stitches as it takes to completely remove that free edge. If there's a free edge to pick at, they will pick at it, and picking leads to damage. So prevent that from happening by making sure you get enough of these anchor stitches in right around the hairline. reason we're doing these back-to-back anchors is to just really make sure there's a lot of stability here right around the face. So again, lifting up and rocking back. So you can see right here, there's nothing to pick at. There's no free edge. Everything's laying nice and flush and smooth. And I have my 4 back-to-back anchor stitches. It looks good. It feels good. Now we're ready to start to work all around the other side of the head until we duplicate what we just did here on the opposite side. Now what changes with the direction of our sewing is we no longer need to crisscross that thread. And this is why we want to start on our dominant side, because this is actually easier to sew when you start to work in the opposite direction. So we're going to over direct our thread in the direction we're sewing, which is now this way. Over direct, and what we're going to do is just split the difference between our previous stitches, and this is called back stitching. Now here, because you already have a lot of anchor stitches in place, you don't need to necessarily do an anchor stitch. You could do a top stitch, but for now, we're going to continue for maximum stability. We're going to continue to do anchor stitches, a single anchor stitch. So over direct, go behind, picking up all of the hair, making sure you're not sticking your needle either direction and kicking or over directing that hair, bringing that needle through. Twist once, stabilize to lock in place. Now you'll notice that I'm rotating my hands counterclockwise, rocking to the left and to the right. I'm rotating my hands counterclockwise every single time. If you rotate clockwise, it'll change the knot as you go up and through. You could actually end up removing the twist that you just created. So over directing, going behind. Notice how I'm right in the middle of my previous stitch, scooping up all of the hair in the anchor row. Bringing that through, staying nice and high. One rotation, stabilizing with my thumb, going up and through. And hold that in place, rock it to lock it. So you can see those tiny little knots on the top of your row. I'm going to go back. Now there's a bead behind here, so I'm just going to go just to the left of this bead, over directing, going behind. Removing that slack by palming that thread, rotating those peace signs, going up through. Stabilizing with my thumb, rock it to the left and to the right. So we've completed our back stitching. You can see it's nice and secure. There's nothing wiggling, nothing moving, nothing pulling. You can also look and make sure that you didn't miss anything if you have those folded wefts on the interior before you get too far. So now that we're approaching this marking clip, we want to remove the marking clip, stabilize the weft, and place this just below. This is going to prevent any slipping or sliding of those wefts. I'm going to move this thread out of my way. Over directing. I'm going to do one more single anchor stitch. Rotating once, stabilizing with my thumb, going through, up through that knot, stabilizing, rocking to the left and to the right. Now, because we've already captured this fold here and it's nice and secure, and we don't have a marking clip until right here, what I'm going to show you is how to create a top stitch. Creating a top stitch is easy. If you can do a double anchor, if you can do a single anchor, you can definitely do a top stitch, because the only thing you don't do that's different is the rotation of your fingers in that counterclockwise direction. So there's a bead here, so I'm going to jump to this side. Go through. Bring that up. And how you create that top stitch is by simply lifting up with no rotation and closing that thread. You rock it just like you do with your anchors. Now you want to maintain tension and control because this is a top stitch. Again, you're not locking anything in place. As we approach the next marking clip, you can remove that, stabilize the wefts with your thumb, and hold those wefts in place with the clip. Now, because there was a marking clip here, we want to make sure that we create that single anchor. Rotating once, stabilizing, going up through, and locking. Over direct. Now, if you see your wefts start to slip, go ahead and make sure that they're still cascading from the interior, not the exterior. So always make those adjustments before you lock those wefts in place with those anchor stitches. Going down, holding my needle nice and vertical, going through the hair, making sure not to kick out or over direct the hair with my needle, holding that up, doing one rotation for that single anchor, counterclockwise, stabilizing with my thumb, going up through the loop, removing my hands, keeping my thumb in place, rocking to the left and to the right. Removing the clip, stabilizing with my thumb, holding the wefts in place, over direct my thread. I'm going to do another single anchor. See if there's drag that comes up. Sometimes you catch some hair. Just make sure you pull out that hair before you close your stitch. Keeping my hands up, one rotation, stabilizing with my thumb, going up through the loop, keeping my thumb in place, rocking to the left and to the right. Right here where you see the clip is creating buckle in the hair, stabilize, remove that clip, and hold everything in place. That's going to prevent you from having any of that kicking out of the hair or the over direction of the hair when you sew. Over direct the thread in the direction you're sewing. Go behind, scooping up all of the hair in the anchor row. You'll notice how by doing that naturally, the needle is in the center of that loop. One rotation. Pulling out that little baby hair that got trapped. Stabilizing with my thumb, going up through. Always maintaining control of my wefts and my thread. Keeping my thumb in place to stabilize those wefts and locking my stitch. Remember, anywhere there's a marking clip, you always need to do a single anchor on either side of that marking clip. Now, mind you, we have double the amount of marking clips we typically would if we were doing hand-tied with slim weft. So you don't know if this is the beginning or the end of a weft on the interior. So it's always better to be safe than sorry and always do a single anchor on either side of the marking clip. Approaching these ends, so we want to make sure we have enough anchors, and there's an end of a weft here, so just to be sure, I'll do a single anchor and a double anchor just to make sure that that end of those slim wefts is locked in place. to be sure. Another double anchor to hold that end in place. 1, 2 rotations counterclockwise, stabilizing with my finger, with my thumb going up through loop, removing my fingers while still stabilizing with my thumb and rocking it to lock it. Feel to make sure there's no free edge on the end of that weft. And you can see this one starting to pop up here, so we'll address that as we get closer. Before getting too far, you can always lift up and make sure you didn't miss anything. There's no wefts slipping or sliding around. So it looks good. Now what I want to do is stabilize. I'm going to just tuck that right down back into the cascade of wefts and clip that in place. I'm going to over direct. Now I'm using this metal duckbill clip to keep this section nice and high and tight, controlling any of these baby hairs or flyaways that might drop down or sag into your line of sewing. So I see the end of this weft here, so I'm going to over direct, go behind, pick up that hair in the anchor row, remove that slack, keeping my hands nice and high. And then, because that's an end, I want to do a double anchor. It's better to be safe than sorry. Now I see a little loop here, so I'm going to hold my knot and just gently remove that looped hair. Stabilizing, pulling up, and rocking it to lock it, and I've completely secured that fold on the interior. Remove my marking clip. I'm going to do that double anchor right here just to really secure that end of the weft. You can really see the difference in that knot. It's slightly bigger. It looks like a little ice cream cone at the top. And that's the difference between a single anchor and a double anchor. As you can see, 2 of those knots stacked right on top of each other. One rotation, holding with your thumb, going up through the loop. You see a lot starting to sag from the interior. You can take your marking clip and lift up just to prevent that sagging. Over directing. Lifting up. 1 rotation. Stabilizing with your thumb. Up through the needle. Remove these fingers. Rock it to lock it. Go forward. One rotation, placing your thumb up through the needle. Pull it through, rock it to lock it. There's a fold right here. So I'm going to make sure that I do a double anchor to really capture that fold. Now here we have our single anchor right in front of that first bead, and we're going to continue to do back-to-back anchor stitches. Notice how the end, my feeder thread is getting shorter, and I'm maintaining that control by palming it in my hand. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 back-to-back single anchors, and I have room to get in one more. Feeling that edge, it's laying nice and flush. So now we simply go back to here to complete our back stitching with back-to-back single anchors and ending with a double anchor. Go once, twice, stabilizing with our thumb, going up through, locking that in place. And if you want to be extra sure, you can always add in one more back-to-back double anchor just to be safe. We'll go through one more time, making sure this sewing isn't going anywhere. All the wefts are staying in place. She's not going to have any slipping issues. 1, 2, stabilizing with my thumb, go up through the needle, or go up through the loop, stabilizing with my thumb, lifting up, and really applying that pressure to rock it and lock it in place. Take my needle out of my thread. Now you can grab your scissors, make sure it's approximately 2 to 3 inches long, no shorter. Remove this clip on this side. If you would like to hide the extra thread from sticking out here and here, you could take a loop tool or a replacement loop, bring that up behind the anchor row, loop that thread through, and pull it down to tuck it behind, and it's hiding on the interior of the row. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Bring the loop tool up from behind the row. Grab the thread and pull that down and behind the row. Once it's complete, go through and brush. You can always check your sewing, make sure there aren't any slipped wefts from the interior by running your finger along the bottom edge and making sure that that's nice and clean. You can see that thread that we just hid is hiding right here on the interior. If you see any slipping or falling wefts, that's not a problem. This is the reason why we check. So if you see that, you want to make sure that you go back through, simply add in a couple anchor stitches, double anchors, just to make sure that you bring that weft up and lock it in place. You always want to check yourself before they leave to make sure that nothing is slipping or falling, because you have the opportunity right now to fix it before they leave or before you move on to the next row.